One. That's all you get. Just one great leap away from reality, and then you're stuck with the choices that you've made. Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a step back to the roots of this channel and go take a look at a Star Wars Disney Plus show. If you remember, I really got this channel started with Season 1 of The Mandalorian, specifically Episode 4. I think you can all figure out why. But aside from the first season of The Bad Batch, I haven't really dipped back into that well. Well, let's go take a look at Skeleton Crew, Episode 1. I have not watched anything other than Episode 1. I'm going to do these reviews episode by episode, as per my usual. There'll be a short spoiler-free section at the beginning, and then I'll get into the spoilers for each episode in the later part of my review. But let's not bury the lead. Did I like the first episode of Skeleton Crew? Heck yeah! I enjoyed it thoroughly for several different reasons, but for two major reasons. Reason number one, this show is exactly what the trailer advertised. I saw the trailer and I actually felt a bit of hope, a bit of interest, which is a first for a Star Wars series in quite a while for me. Because what it was advertising was Zathura, if you remember that movie, meets the Goonies. And I'm like, yeah, I could get into that. Obvious nostalgia bait, obvious children's show writing, but if that's what they were offering, I'd be into that. So, and we could get into episode 1, 100% that is what you get. It is the Goonies meets Zathura. If you haven't seen Zathura, go look it up, go watch it. It's big, it's dumb, it's fun, you'll love it. The other rule that this show follows has a lot to do with the opening scene, because there was a rule in fiction. When you introduce a fantastical world, whether we're talking about kaiju attacking Japan or space, you get one great step away from reality, and everything else in your story has to be consistent with that one great step. For instance, in Kaiju number 8, the very first chapter, Matsumoto introduces that there exist in this world giant kaiju. Giant beings many stories tall that can walk on land. Now, this is clearly impossible in the world because of many factors. The square cube law, physics, but all of the fantastic elements that Matsumoto introduces were introduced either on that first page or in that first chapter. The only thing that wasn't covered by seeing Mina one-shot the giant salamander kaiju that we call Ignition was the psychic abilities. Everything else covered on that first page. And the psychic abilities were covered a little later in the chapter. And everything we've seen since then has been consistent with those two unnatural elements. Giant beings can exist, and they have psychic abilities. So, Skeleton Crew opens. We get a scene of something happens, and it's a big, dumb action scene. It is defying the laws of physics. It is making the characters do something that, given the technology of the setting they're in, is objectively stupid. And yet, I think that this was a well thought out scene. I think the creators very deliberately did this. They said, okay, this is the kind of show that we are going to be. Because this scene harkened back to... It wasn't nostalgia bait. It was more than just nostalgia bait, but it was definitely tying the show to certain elements. It was tying the show to Treasure Planet. It was tying the show to the Goonies. It was tying the show back to all of these wonderful movies of the 80s, 90s, and early aughts. But more than that, that first scene was leaning into what Skeleton Crew is. It was establishing Skeleton Crew's identity. It's saying, okay, we are not going to care about elements like what this situation would actually look like in a universe with the established Star Wars technology of this timeline. We are going to use this these props to tell this story this way. We are not ashamed of that. We are proud of it. Transformers does the same thing. Giant robots, just as impossible as giant kaiju, but every single Transformers show accepts this. So when we see Optimus Prime crawl up on the roof to get a sniper shot, we know that in reality that's a brick building in a Midwest town. It's going to collapse under his weight. But it doesn't, and we don't care because there are certain things we accept because the show owns it. And that is just, in my opinion, that's definitely what the creators were doing with that first scene. Establishing the rules of this universe and saying, hey, we know what we are as a show. We're a kids show. We are going to ask you to suspend your disbelief specifically over the laws of physics and the logical use of technology and just have fun with us. We are doing this because it looks cool, because it plays into the cultural imagination and what people think and what kids think things are. And the show stays consistent to that vibe, to that theme, to that we own the genre that we belong to throughout the first episode. Because of that, you know what a pedantic stickler I can be for the laws of physics. And because of that, I'm willing to overlook this. But now it's time to get into the spoiler section. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, check out the links below the video to check out my science fiction books, Hidden Fires, Dragons, Aliens, and things that go boom in the night. Hopefully, I stick a little closer to real physics. Now, spoilers. The scene opens with a text crawl. A text crawl that ends on a very interesting note. Specifically, it says, these pirates boldly brand their armored hulls as a sign to all ships. Surrender or die. Then we get into the opening scene. And I don't think this is a coincidence. This is a sign to me that the creators knew exactly what they were doing with this opening scene. Because going back to the beginning, every story, every fantastical story gets one great step away from reality. One step to establish the internal logic of their world. And with this opening scene, you have a pirate ship attacking a merchant vessel. And it explains that the New Republic is trying to keep order, but this is the fringes of the New Republic. There's not enough New Republic law enforcement to go around to protect all of these ships. And so the pirates are attacking. And the pirates kind of fly their pirate flag and say, this is who we are, this is what we do. And that, I believe, is absolutely the main point of this opening scene. This is a show saying, okay, you know what? This is who we are, this is what we do. We are going to ignore the laws of physics. We're going to have this pirate ship come alongside and attack the merchant ship broadside. We're going to have the pirate ship breach their hull in a ridiculous manner and load 3 separate landing tubes in. Big landing tubes that are easy to destroy, as are seen. This pirate ship, why didn't it try to blast it with some sort of e-impulse? Why didn't the pirate ship do this? Why didn't the pirate ship do that? Because this is a show for children, and the creators wanted to play on the mental images that the children have already in their heads. They know what a pirate is. This show is going to go the same route as the movie Treasure Planet. In many, many different scenes. If you remember the scene in Treasure Planet where Jim Hawkins is flipping through his visual storybook, you have similar scenes where you have a nearly identical visual storybook one of the characters in here uses. And that same utter disregard for what the void of space is actually like and how ships and pirates would function in that void that you had in Treasure Planet, you have in here. This is a show that wants to have fun and tell a fun story. And this opening scene is showing us that yes, there are probably far, far more logical ways for a pirate crew to attack a merchant vessel in the Star Wars universe. But this show is going to have fun with it and do something big and flashy. This show is not going to overly concern itself with the laws of physics. This show just wants the audience to have fun. And then we cut to our main character on the planet, far, far away from wherever that piracy thing was going on. And if you just look at the piracy scene as introducing a critical character, it really didn't need to be there. But if you look at the piracy scene as the show creators introducing the great leap away from reality, it does need to be there because there's a lot more of that in the show as we go on. So we get a look at our main characters. We've got a group of, again, this is the Goonies meets Zathura. We've got a group of 4 kids, 2 groups of friends. They're not really friends with each other, but they're being forced together to work on this adventure. And this is where the show says, don't worry, we're going to have a bunch of flashy, fun action for you, but we can also do subtle writing. Some things they introduce subtly. There is something profoundly suspicious about this planet, about the systems of schooling and governance on this planet, because we see that, but they're not something necessarily that the kids who are going to be entertained by the big flashy space flights are going to catch on to. Primarily, there's this one scene where you have a parent who is high up in the government. She comes in, gives a speech to the school, and then we find out that she is extremely, extremely concerned that her child achieve first place in class. And we can see that there's this subtext of fear and stress in the mother's face as she's telling her daughter how important it is and how wonderful it is that her daughter is the first in her class. Because, well, her mom just says there's not enough room for everybody at the top, but you definitely get the vibe that passing this test, getting a good score on this test is very vital, and bad things will happen to those who fall at the bottom, into the bottom quartile of the test results. But again, this is also subtly played out that it's not necessarily difficult to notice, but it's definitely not something the children will notice. The children who are watching this, because in the next scenes we see rebellious kids riding their bikes where they shouldn't be, getting caught by truant officers, exploring strange parts of the forest. Speaking of the bicycles, plenty of nods to E.T. there, plenty of nods to Flight of the Navigator. And, of course, our kids come together, and they're bickering and fighting like kids do. And the child actors are pretty solid. I mean, they're child actors, but they're definitely competent for the roles. And for various reasons of their own, one kid wants adventure, one kid's just there because their friend dragged them there, one kid wants to do a little looting. They come across this spaceship, and they break into the spaceship, not knowing it's a spaceship, of course. And this is where the Zathura or Flight of the Navigator inspiration takes off. The kids accidentally start the spaceship, and it takes off. The show has a pretty decent setup for why you could accidentally just basically hit a button and the spaceship would take off on its own. Turns out the last action of the pilot droid looked like it was trying to take off from the planet, and it was just about to complete the startup procedure. Basically, one more button had to be pressed, and then the ship would have taken off. The kids come in, end up pressing the button. Ship takes off and takes them all out into space. And that's where the episode ends. This episode was just so much fun. I have not had this much fun watching an episode of a live-action story in a while. Yes, there are dumb physics-breaking elements to it, but the show owns it. So far, the writing seems to be very good. We have, this dark undertone of what happens to the kids who fail in this system, layered underneath the conflict of kids wanting to either rebel from or wanting more from their parents. I'm not going to deny there's some really silly kids movie moments. The bullying scene. Oh my goodness, has there been a well-written childhood bully scene in the past 30 years? The child actors do have a bit of awkwardness in their scenes, especially when you have the acting between the girl and the boy actors. You can tell that they're trying their hardest to act, which is never something you want to be able to notice in an actor. There are actually a lot of pieces you could pick apart in this, but again, how did this episode make me feel? It made me feel amused and engaged to the point where it was a little bit difficult to stop watching so I could come and make this review before I watched the next episode. Do I recommend it? Yes. If the writing continues as good as in the first episode, and from everything I've heard it should, this is a show that's definitely made to appeal to kids on the surface, but it's got some darker undertones. It's got very good writing so far as I've seen. And it owns the fact that it is taking all of the silly over-the-topness of Zathura, the sense of wonder from Flight of the Navigator, and just the complete silliness of the Goonies, and it's putting them and setting them in space and having fun with it. The movie owns the genre it is. It owns everything that it is. So, not episode, series, whatever. Okay. I definitely recommend this. Great first episode. We'll see if the rest of the writing continues to stay at this level. Leave a comment below telling me what you think of Skeleton Crew Episode 1. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Step into a world of science and of story, of laughter and of tears. Betty Adams has crafted entire worlds of science fiction and science fantasy adventure in her Humans Are Weird series and in her Dying Embers series. Be prepared to laugh, cry, and become absorbed. Check out her books at the links below the video.